The grand ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel in New York City was a glittering spectacle that night, a sea of crystal chandeliers casting prismatic rainbows across the polished marble floors. Laughter and the clink of champagne flutes filled the air, mingling with the soft strains of a live string quartet. The elite of the city, financiers, media moguls, and philanthropists, mingled in clusters, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos screaming old money and influence. It was the annual gala for the Children's Hospital Foundation, an event I'd been invited to not out of pity, but because of my work. At 27, I, Jasmine Williams, had transitioned from a promising ballet dancer to a freelance software developer after a devastating car accident 2 years ago left me paralyzed from the waist down. My latest project, a secure app for tracking pediatric patient data, had earned me a quiet nod from the foundation's board, and with it, this invitation. I sat at a table near the back, my wheelchair tucked discreetly under the crisp white tablecloth. My emerald green gown, simple yet elegant, hugged my frame, but I felt invisible amid the opulence. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped a glass of water, untouched, my mind drifting back to the accident, the screech of tires on a rainy Brooklyn street, the impact that shattered my spine and ended my dancing career. I'd rebuilt my life bite by bite, coding from my apartment, but events like this reminded me how far I still had to go to feel truly seen. That's when the voice cut through the hum like a knife. "You're in my seat." I looked up to see a man in his mid-30s, tall and impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit, his face sharp with entitlement. Marcus Chen, I later learned, a white investment banker known for his aggressive deals on Wall Street. He was flanked by a group of similarly polished friends, their expressions a mix of amusement and impatience. Without waiting for a response, he snatched the name card from the table in front of me, mine, with Jasmine Williams, software developer and contributor, printed neatly, and crumpled it in his fist, tossing it aside like trash. My heart pounded, a flush of humiliation rising in my cheeks. The nearby conversations faltered, eyes turning toward us. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words caught in my throat, the weight of their stares pressing down like the accident all over again. Marcus leaned in closer, his cologne overpowering, a smirk playing on his lips as if this were just another negotiation he was sure to win. His smirk widened as he straightened up, his voice rising just enough to draw more attention from the surrounding tables. "Do you even know where you are? This is the VIP section." He gestured grandly at the opulent room, his words laced with condescension, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. "It's not for, well, people like you. The ones they invite out of pity, to fill quotas or whatever." I felt the heat rush to my face, my fingers digging into the arms of my wheelchair as if anchoring me to the spot. The murmurs started then, subtle at first, like ripples in a pond. A woman at the next table, dripping in diamonds, leaned toward her companion and whispered loudly enough for me to catch, she probably didn't donate a dime. "Just here for the free food." Laughter trickled from a few others, sharp and mocking, turning my stomach into knots. Marcus's eyes raked over me, lingering on my wheelchair with undisguised disdain, as if it were an offensive prop. He stepped even closer, his expensive cologne assaulting my senses, a cloying mix of sandalwood and arrogance that made me want to recoil. "You think wheeling in here makes you one of us? You're a symbol of weakness, sweetheart. You make everyone uncomfortable just by being here. Why don't you roll back to wherever you came from?" The words hit like punches, each one dredging up memories I'd buried deep, the stares in the ballet studio when I was the only black dancer, the accidental exclusions from auditions, the pitying looks after my accident that reduced me to my disability. My heart raced, tears pricking at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. I'd rebuilt my life after the crash, learning to code, creating apps that helped kids like those this gala supported. I wasn't weak, I was a survivor. But in that moment, under the weight of their gazes, I felt small again, invisible yet hypervisible for all the wrong reasons. Still, I held my tongue, my breath steadying as I met his gaze. The room seemed to hold its breath too, waiting for the next blow. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair so tightly my knuckles ached, the cool metal biting into my palms as I fought to keep my composure. My lips trembled, but I forced my voice to stay soft, barely above a whisper. I don't want any trouble. I'll move to another table, if you'll let me. The words hung in the air like a fragile truce, but Marcus wasn't interested in peace. He stepped forward, blocking my path completely, his shadow falling over me like a storm cloud. "Oh, please," he sneered, his hand hovering near the handle of my chair as if debating whether to shove me away himself. The murmurs around us grew bolder now, a few more snickers joining the chorus, feeding off his bravado. I could feel the eyes of the entire VIP section on us, judging, waiting for the spectacle to unfold. Inside, a storm raged, anger, humiliation, memories of 1,000 microaggressions flooding back, the ballet directors who overlooked me for my skin tone, the doctors post-accident who spoke over me as if I weren't there. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not this banker with his polished shoes and inflated ego, who probably closed deals by stepping on people like me every day. As he reached to push my chair, I lifted my chin and met his gaze head-on. My eyes locked onto his, not with fear or pleading, but with a quiet defiance born from years of resilience. It was the look I'd practiced in the mirror after therapy sessions, the one that said I was more than my chair, more than my skin, more than whatever label he slapped on me. In that moment, the room seemed to narrow to just us, his smirk faltering for a split second, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. He paused, his hand dropping slightly, as if my stare had thrown him off balance. The laughter around us died down, replaced by an awkward hush. I prepared to wheel myself back, my heart pounding but my resolve unbroken, knowing this wasn't the end. My eyes held his a beat longer, a silent promise that his words wouldn't define me. The laughter started as a low ripple, spreading from our table to the ones nearby like wildfire in dry grass. It wasn't genuine amusement, it was the cruel kind, the sort that bonds the elite by excluding others. A woman in a sparkling gown, her neck heavy with jewels that probably cost more than my annual rent, leaned forward and called out loudly enough for half the ballroom to hear, "Someone call the staff. She needs to be escorted to a table that suits her condition." The word condition hung in the air like a slur, twisting the knife deeper into my chest. Humiliation burned through me, hot and unrelenting, making my skin prickle under the gown. I could feel it all over again, the stares from my ballet days, when I was the only black face in the studio, the whispers about how I didn't fit the aesthetic. Directors passing me over for roles, claiming it was about ensemble harmony, but we all knew it was code for something uglier. And after the accident, the pitying glances from strangers, reducing me to my wheelchair, as if my mind, my code, my contributions didn't matter. I'd clawed my way back, building apps that saved lives in hospitals, yet here I was, still the outsider. Marcus fed off the energy, his eyes gleaming with triumph. He stepped even closer, his polished shoes inches from my wheels, and placed his hand firmly on the armrest of my chair. His touch was invasive, possessive, like he owned not just the seat but me in that moment. "I'll help you," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, loud enough to echo. He began to push, the chair jolting slightly under his force, sending a jolt of violation through me. It wasn't just the physical intrusion, it was the assumption that I was helpless, that he could manhandle me out of sight like discarded luggage. My breath caught, a surge of anger mixing with the shame, but I held it in check. Screaming wouldn't change minds like his, it would only confirm whatever stereotype he held. Instead, I focused on the cool air of the ballroom, the distant music, steadying myself. His grip tightened, the push more insistent, and I wondered how far he'd go before someone intervened, or if anyone would at all. I lifted my gaze to meet his, my voice emerging steady and measured, cutting through the tension like a quiet blade. "You shouldn't touch me." The words weren't shouted, weren't laced with venom, they were simple, deliberate, a boundary drawn in the sand. But in that vast ballroom, they landed with the weight of an unspoken threat. The scattered laughter that had been building moments ago faltered, then died completely. A few heads turned away, cheeks flushing as if they'd been caught in something unseemly. Marcus froze, his hand still on the armrest, his fingers tightening involuntarily before he pulled back slightly. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, quickly masked by that same arrogant smirk. "Oh? And why's that?" he retorted, his tone mocking, though it lacked the earlier confidence. "Afraid I'll ruin that cheap dress of yours?" "What is it, off the rack from some discount store?" The jab stung, aimed at my simple gown, the one I'd chosen not for flash but for comfort, a far cry from the couture swirling around us. But I didn't rise to it. Instead, I reached slowly into the side compartment of my wheelchair, my movements calm and precise, as if handling something fragile yet powerful. My fingers closed around the slim card, the one I kept hidden for moments like this. It wasn't just any ID, it was my access badge to the Intergovernmental Security Commission, where I worked covertly as a software specialist in national cybersecurity. The silver-edged laminate bore a subtle emblem, a shield intertwined with digital circuits, that few outside classified circles would recognize. I'd earned it through sleepless nights coding encryption protocols that protected sensitive data for international agencies, a far cry from the ballet stages I'd once graced. I placed it gently on the table between us, face up, without a word. The metallic sheen caught the chandelier light, drawing a subtle glint that seemed to shift the air around us. Internally, a whirlwind stirred. I'd kept this part of my life secret to avoid the spotlight, to let my work speak without the baggage of my past, the accident that stole my legs, the racism that shadowed my career. Exposing it now felt like shedding armor, but necessary. Marcus's eyes flicked down to it, his smirk fading as curiosity turned to confusion. He leaned in, peering closer, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the dawning realization that this wasn't a bluff. The hush deepened, a few whispers starting anew, "What's that?" But I remained silent, letting the card do the talking. My heart steadied, this was the pivot, the moment where his power began to crack. Marcus hadn't even finished his mocking laugh when a young server, maybe in his mid-20s, with a crisp uniform and a tray balanced expertly in one hand, approached our table. His eyes were locked on the ID card I'd placed there, the silver emblem catching the light like a beacon. He stopped short, his posture shifting from casual to alert, as if he'd just spotted something explosive. "Ma'am," he whispered, leaning in just enough to be discreet but urgent, "excuse me, but are you?" I raised a hand subtly, my fingers forming a gentle stop sign, signaling silence. I didn't need him to say it aloud, not yet. The server straightened immediately, his back snapping rigid like a soldier at attention. He nodded once, a quick, respectful acknowledgement, and stepped back without another word, his eyes darting briefly to Marcus before retreating toward the service area. Marcus frowned, his curiosity piqued now, overriding his earlier disdain. "What's so special about this little card?" he scoffed, snatching it up from the table. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, turning it over as if inspecting a counterfeit bill. For a split second, his expression remained smug, dismissive. But then, as he read the fine print, the official seal of the Intergovernmental Security Commission, the embedded chip hinting at high-level clearance, his face drained of color. His eyes widened, the smirk evaporating into a mask of pale shock. He stared at it for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 seconds, his hand trembling ever so slightly. Internally, a quiet satisfaction bloomed in my chest. This was the turning point I'd anticipated, the moment when his world tilted. I'd kept this badge hidden for reasons like this, to navigate spaces without the weight of my role as a cybersecurity specialist pulling focus. My work involved crafting impenetrable firewalls for international data networks, collaborating with agencies that dealt in secrets nations guarded fiercely. It wasn't glamour, it was precision, born from the same discipline that once propelled me across ballet stages. But now, in this glittering den of privilege, it was my shield. Marcus swallowed hard, his voice cracking as he tried to recover. This can't be real. But the doubt in his eyes told me otherwise. The game had shifted, and he knew it. Marcus dropped the card back onto the table as if it burned his fingers, but he forced a laugh, loud and brittle, echoing awkwardly in the now hushed VIP section. "Oh, come on," he said, waving a hand dismissively, though his voice carried a hint of strain. "This is just some clever trick, right? Borrowing someone's fancy badge to scare people off? Pretty creative, I'll give you that." He glanced around at the nearby guests, seeking allies in his mockery, but the smiles he got in return were thin, hesitant. No one jumped in to back him up this time. Inside, I felt a surge of quiet power rising, like code compiling flawlessly after hours of debugging. Seeing that subtle tremor in his hand, the way his eyes darted from the card to me and back, told me everything. This man, who moments ago had wielded his privilege like a weapon, was unraveling. I'd spent years navigating rooms like this, ballet auditions where directors dismissed my talent with a glance at my skin, post-accident meetings where tech execs talked over me, assuming my wheelchair meant I had nothing to offer. But I'd learned to turn invisibility into an advantage, coding in the shadows, building systems that protected data for agencies far beyond this gala's reach. Now, his doubt was my leverage. A couple of weak chuckles rippled from a table or two, but they died quickly, swallowed by the growing tension. The air felt thicker, charged, as if the chandelier lights had dimmed just a fraction. People shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact with both of us. Marcus crossed his arms, trying to regain his footing, his posture rigid. "Nobody's buying this," he pressed, his tone sharper now, laced with unease. "You're not, whatever this thing says you are." But his eyes betrayed him, flickering with uncertainty, scanning the room for reassurance that wasn't coming. The shift was palpable. The crowd that had egged him on was now retreating into silence, the laughter replaced by whispers too low to catch. I sat there, unmoving, letting the moment stretch, my inner resolve hardening like encrypted code. He was teetering, and I knew it wouldn't take much more to tip him over. The young server didn't waste a moment after stepping back. He hurried toward the far end of the ballroom, weaving through clusters of guests with an urgency that caught a few glances. I watched him lean over the reception desk, whispering intently to an older man, the event manager, I assumed, in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and an impeccably pressed tuxedo that spoke of years in high society service. The manager's face shifted from polite boredom to sharp focus as the server pointed subtly in our direction. He nodded once, then strode toward us with purposeful steps, his expression a mask of professional concern. By the time he reached the table, the whispers had started to swell again, like a tide pulling back only to crash harder. He picked up the ID card delicately, examining it under the chandelier's glow, his eyes widening just a fraction before he composed himself. Turning to Marcus, who still loomed over me with crossed arms, the manager cleared his throat. "Sir, I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding this guest." Marcus barked a short, incredulous laugh, his earlier uncertainty hardening into defiance. "Misunderstanding? What's there to misunderstand? She's crashing the VIP area. Who is she supposed to be, a secret agent? Some undercover cop?" His voice carried that same mocking edge, but it cracked at the end, betraying the nerves bubbling beneath. The manager didn't engage, instead turning to me with a respectful bow of his head, his tone deferential. "Ma'am, we'll rearrange the seating immediately to ensure your comfort. Please accept our apologies for any inconvenience." Internally, a calm resolve settled over me, like debugging a complex algorithm and watching the errors resolve one by one. I knew the revelation was imminent. My role at the Intergovernmental Security Commission wasn't something that stayed hidden once spotted by someone in the know. I'd joined after the accident, channeling my precision from ballet into crafting unbreakable digital defenses for global networks, work that intersected with events like this, where philanthropy masked high-stakes alliances. But I'd always kept it low-key, avoiding the spotlight that could expose vulnerabilities. Now, as the manager's words hung in the air, I maintained my composure, nodding faintly without speaking. The tide was turning, and Marcus's facade was cracking wider with every passing second. I wheeled my chair back slowly, deliberately, the software of the wheels cutting through the stifled murmurs like a whisper in a storm. The manager stood there, still holding my ID, his face a picture of restrained panic, while Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bluster fading into uneasy silence. But I wasn't done letting the moment unfold. With a deep breath, I gripped the armrests and pushed myself up, standing tall on legs that the world assumed were useless. Gasps rippled through the nearby tables, sharp and involuntary, as if I'd shattered some unspoken illusion. The accident had paralyzed me temporarily, a cruel twist after a drunk driver sideswiped my cab on that rainy night 2 years ago. Physical therapy, sheer willpower, and experimental treatments had restored my mobility months back, but I'd kept the wheelchair for events like this, to blend in, to observe without drawing fire, to shield my true role in the shadows of international cybersecurity. Now, as I stood, the ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. I shrugged off my outer shawl, revealing the sleek black vest beneath, tailored and professional, with a small silver shield emblem pinned to the lapel, a subtle insignia of the Office of International Strategic Coordination, tied to UN-level operations. It wasn't flashy, it didn't need to be. Those who knew, knew. Whispers erupted like sparks, "That's the emblem for high-clearance strategists." One woman murmured to her companion, "I've seen it in classified briefings, UN affiliates, global security." Another voice, hushed, "Who is she really?" I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, I turned to the server, who still hovered nearby, his eyes wide with recognition. In a low, composed voice, I asked, "May I proceed to the private conference room now?" He nodded vigorously, stepping aside as if I were royalty. As I moved forward, my steps measured and unhurried, I swept my gaze across the room. It landed briefly on Marcus, his face ashen, mouth slightly agape, then on the clusters of guests who'd laughed earlier, their expressions now a mix of awe and shame. The air grew thick, the chatter dying to pin-drop silence under the weight of my stare. It wasn't anger in my eyes, it was the quiet authority of someone who'd been underestimated one too many times. The power dynamic had flipped, and they felt it, every single one. The murmurs in the ballroom had barely subsided when the MC's voice cut through the air, wrapping up the opening remarks with polished enthusiasm. The spotlight swung lazily across the crowd, highlighting clusters of guests mid-conversation, before it locked onto me, standing there in the aisle, my wheelchair abandoned like a shed skin. A hush fell over the room, thicker than before, as if the collective realization of my mobility had already cracked their facades. Then came the announcement, delivered in the warm, authoritative tone of Park Ji-soo, the 60-year-old founder of the Global Scholarship Program, her silver hair catching the light from the podium. And now, we are honored to invite the recipient of this year's most prestigious international scholarship, Ms. Jasmine Langley, to the stage for a few words. The name, my full professional alias, the one I used in classified circles to separate my past from my present, hung in the air like a revelation. Gasps erupted, sharp and scattered, as heads whipped toward me. Marcus, still rooted near the table, his face a mask of dawning horror, gaped openly, his mouth slack like a fish pulled from water. The woman who'd whispered about my condition earlier clutched her pearls, her companion frozen mid-sip. The entire VIP section, once a den of smug exclusion, now buzzed with stunned whispers. Langley? The cybersecurity prodigy? I read about that scholarship, it's for elite contributors in global strategy. Internally, a quiet thrill coursed through me, the twist I'd held close like an encrypted file finally decrypting. The scholarship wasn't just an award, it was recognition for my covert work developing secure software frameworks that safeguarded international pediatric health data networks, systems I'd built in isolation, drawing on the discipline of my ballet days to weave unbreakable code. I'd kept it secret, even here, to avoid the spotlight that could compromise my role at the commission. But now, as the applause started, tentative at first, then swelling, it felt like vindication. I'd entered this room as an intruder in their eyes. Now, I was the honored guest. I smoothed my gown and began my ascent to the stage, each step deliberate, the room's eyes following me like spotlights of their own. Marcus's expression twisted into disbelief, his world crumbling in real time. I walked up the steps to the stage with measured grace, each footfall echoing in the stunned silence of the ballroom. The spotlight enveloped me, warm and unrelenting, highlighting the simple lines of my emerald gown against the opulent backdrop. No longer the invisible woman in the wheelchair, I stood tall, my posture a remnant of ballet training, poised, unyielding. The crowd's eyes followed me, a sea of faces shifting from confusion to awe, the air thick with anticipation. At the podium, I adjusted the microphone, letting the quiet stretch for a few heartbeats. The room held its breath, even the quartet in the corner had paused. Then, in a clear, steady voice, I began, "I once thought I didn't belong here." The words landed softly but resonated like a gong. I paused, scanning the audience, the financiers with their champagne flutes frozen midair, the socialites clutching their pearls. My gaze lingered on the table where it all started, on Marcus, his face now a pallid mask of regret, his hands clenched at his sides. "Tonight, I was asked to leave this very table," I continued, my tone even, without accusation. "I was told to roll away because my presence, my dress, my chair, made others uncomfortable. Because, apparently, strength looks a certain way, and anything else is weakness to be hidden." Whispers stirred, but I pressed on, my eyes sweeping over those who'd laughed earlier, their expressions crumbling under the weight of my stare. I was dismissed not for who I am, but for what they assumed, a quota fill, a pity invite. But here's the truth, I earned my place here. Through code that secures global networks, through resilience that rebuilt me after loss. I don't need to shout or fight, I let my work speak. My glance brushed Marcus again, light as a feather but sharp as a blade. "I'm not the one who should feel ashamed tonight." Internally, satisfaction thrummed through me, not vengeance, but justice. These words were my retort, elegant and cutting, exposing their biases without raising my voice. I'd turned their weapon against them, my story a mirror they couldn't ignore. As I finished my words, the silence lingered for a heartbeat, heavy and expectant. Then, it shattered, not with boos or whispers, but with applause. It started slow, a single pair of hands from the back, then another, swelling like a wave crashing through the ballroom. People rose to their feet, not in orchestrated unison like at award shows, but organically, compelled by something deeper. Chairs scraped against the marble floor as financiers, socialites, and philanthropists stood, their faces a mosaic of emotions, some flushed with shame, others lit with genuine admiration. The ovation built, echoing off the chandeliers, a thunderous acknowledgement that drowned out the quartet's resumption. From the stage, I scanned the crowd, my heart steady amid the roar. Marcus remained at the table, his earlier arrogance evaporated, he slumped slightly, head bowed, avoiding the eyes now turning toward him with judgment. A young assistant from the event staff approached him quietly, her expression neutral as she placed a hand on his shoulder and murmured something in his ear. He nodded numbly, and she deftly unpinned his name tag, Marcus Chen, investment advisor, slipping it into her pocket. It was a subtle dismissal, but in this room of power players, it spoke volumes. His shoulders sagged further, the man who'd tried to erase me now fading into irrelevance himself. I offered a small nod to the audience, a quiet thank you, and descended the steps with the same unhurried poise. No one stopped me, the path cleared as if by invisible command. The applause followed me down the aisle, fading only as I reached the doors. Internally, a profound sense of closure washed over me, not the giddy rush of revenge, but the solid weight of justice served. I'd come here expecting to blend in, to contribute quietly through my code, not to append the evening. Yet, in exposing their biases, I'd reminded them, and myself, that true power wasn't in volume or force, but in truth spoken plainly. By the time I stepped into the cool New York night, my phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications flooded in, hashtag Jasmine Langley trending worldwide, clips of my speech going viral on social media. She turned the tables without raising her voice, one tweet read, shared thousands of times. Another, from overlooked to icon, watch this. My name, once confined to secure servers and classified reports, now topped search engines, my story amplifying voices like mine. It wasn't about fame, it was validation, a ripple that might challenge systems far beyond this gala. I stepped off the stage amid the thunderous applause, the sound swelling like a tide that threatened to pull me back. But I didn't linger. With each deliberate step down the aisle, the ovation began to fracture, voices trailing off as if my departure stole their momentum. The path cleared before me, guests parting like a sea, their earlier whispers now silenced. No one reached out to shake my hand or offer congratulations. Instead, they averted their eyes, cheeks flushed with the sting of self-reflection. The woman who'd mocked my condition clutched her program tightly, her gaze fixed on the floor. Marcus, still at the table, didn't even look up, his shoulders hunched in defeat. Internally, a profound calm settled over me, like the quiet after a storm I'd weathered alone. I didn't need their validation now. I'd come to this gala not for acclaim, but to contribute through my work, the secure systems I'd coded to protect vulnerable data, born from nights of isolation after the accident. Proving myself to them had been incidental, a necessary unmasking of their biases. As I walked, memories flickered, the ballet rehearsals where I danced through pain to prove my worth, the recovery sessions where I rebuilt my body in secret. This moment wasn't triumph, it was closure, a reminder that resilience outlasts arrogance. No one dared stop me. A server near the exit nodded respectfully, holding the door open without a word. The grand double doors swung shut behind me with a soft thud, muffling the applause to nothing. Outside, the cool New York evening air hit me like a cleanse, the city lights twinkling indifferently. I paused on the steps, breathing deeply, the weight of the evening lifting. My phone buzzed in my pocket, messages pouring in, no doubt the viral storm brewing, but I ignored it. I'd said what needed saying, the rest would unfold without me. There was no need to stay, no obligation to accept their belated awe. I'd proven enough, not just to them, but to myself. The night was mine now, free and unburdened. As I lingered just outside the doors for a moment, the muffled sounds from within told me the applause had ceased abruptly, replaced by an uneasy quiet. Back inside, Marcus stood frozen amid the dispersing crowd, his once commanding presence reduced to a shadow. No one approached him, the elite who'd laughed at his jabs now averted their eyes, conversations resuming in hushed tones that excluded him like a pariah. A discreet assistant from the foundation, young, efficient, her tablet in hand, slipped up to him, placing a folded note on the table. "Your credentials have been revoked," she murmured, her voice neutral, professional. "Please exit the premises quietly." Marcus unfolded it with trembling fingers, his face paling further as he read the terse message. No drama, no public announcement, just a swift, silent excision from the event he'd likely helped orchestrate. He nodded numbly, pocketing the note, and slunk toward a side exit, his tailored suit suddenly ill-fitting on his defeated frame. In the corners, journalists huddled, their phones glowing as they typed furiously. He managed 3 major international events, one whispered to another. Managed, past tense now. Within hours, his name would vanish from advisory lists, his LinkedIn profile scrubbed of affiliations, his career evaporating like mist in the morning sun. No scandalous headlines, no viral takedown, just the quiet machinery of consequence, turning inexorably. From my vantage, a sense of poetic balance settled in. Karma didn't roar, it whispered, dismantling him as subtly as he'd tried to erase me. I'd exposed not just his bias, but the fragility of his world. He who deemed me unworthy now faced his own irrelevance, a fitting echo of the dismissal he'd wielded so casually. The morning after, as sunlight filtered through my apartment blinds in Brooklyn, my phone was a whirlwind of alerts. The clip had exploded overnight, a grainy video from someone's phone capturing my opening words on stage. I thought I didn't belong here. Just 6 words, but they resonated like a clarion call, shared across platforms, amassing millions of views. Hashtags like hashtag belong anywhere and hashtag Jasmine Langley flooded feeds, with comments pouring in. This is why we need to check our biases, one read. She exposed the room without a single shout. News outlets picked it up, turning my quiet stand into a symbol of resilience against exclusion. By midday, an email pinged from the foundation's internal network. I still had access through my scholarship ties. It was a memo to all event staff and partners, effective immediately. All future galas will implement mandatory conduct evaluations. No participant shall judge another's eligibility based on appearance, background, or perceived ability. Violations will result in immediate removal. No names mentioned, no direct reference to the night before, but the intent was clear. The system, that gilded machine of privilege, was bending, forced to adapt by the echo of one voice. Whispers in boardrooms would now carry weight, policies rewritten to prevent another like Marcus from wielding unchecked arrogance. Evening news capped it off, the anchor's voice solemn. She didn't make the room silent with power. She did it by making them confront themselves. Internally, a deep peace settled. Change didn't roar, it started in the quiet spaces I'd claimed. My silence had spoken louder than any tirade, sparking a shift that rippled beyond that ballroom. I'd stepped into the night free, but left behind a legacy that demanded better, from them, and perhaps from us all.